Hello, 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 everyone. Thank you for that absolutely seamless technical transition from introduction to beginning of an event. To everyone watching, welcome to this a video game ambassadors sort of panel event. I am Jonas Garway. I work with Intergames as community manager, and I'll sort of be hosting this panel talk today as we sort of talk a little bit about specifically. The event's called Concept to Code, Engineering and Programming the Game Journey, which should bring to mind this idea that, projects and ideas, and particularly games as a technical product, they start with a concept and then they must in some way transition through from being a conceptual product to being often a coded product, with the technology and bones underneath to let the game flourish and to let me press X to doubt. And to talk a little bit about how how do we get there? How do we sort of move from concept to code? And in particular, what is it like sort of contributing to engineering and programming throughout the game's journey? We have with us a group of sort of experts on the subject, really, people who do it, people who live in that world, people who sort of interact with that technology on a day-to-day basis. And so on that front, I'm going to sort of pass it around the room for people just to introduce themselves, just say a little bit about sort of who you are, maybe your sort of current role within the industry, or what you've been up to lately, what people could possibly know you for. And if you've got any sort of specific I suppose like specialities or expertise, perhaps you come from a real sort of a niche background or something, feel free to sort of expand and delight in that history of yours. I'm going to start with Adam. Adam, do you want to just sort of do a little introduction? Is that all right?
Yeah, sounds good. Hello, everyone. I'm Adam Pearce. I'm the gameplay lead at Glowmade. So my role is a bit of a hybrid role, actually. It's sort of half code and half design. I do a lot of the design stuff, but I'm also very heavily involved in sort of the coding side. I've been in the industry for about 10 years now, predominantly as a coder. I've also been a producer and a designer. So I've got like quite a mix of sort of different skills, really. Previously, I was at EA on Star Wars Battlefront 2 and Battlefield and Need for Speed and big games like that, and now working on smallish indie company, but we're not that small anymore. It's grown quite a lot. So in terms of expertise, I guess my sort of like expertise has always been bridging the gap between design and code, which I think is quite important in games, that they're often one and the same. You've got to change sort of one thing to change the other. So it's always been sort of like appreciating the design and the code side. So that's me.
Nice. Thanks very much, Adam. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I know what you mean about that the growth of Glowmade. And I'm excited to see what you're all getting up to over there. Stuart, if I can pass it over to you, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hiya, I'm Stuart Pencil. I'm a programmer at D4T, specialising in graphics. My pronouns are he, they. I've worked in games for about 4 years now, primarily in co-development settings, assisting clients. I've worked on Vampire the Masquerade Bloodhunt, and I've worked on FC24.
Beautiful stuff. Thanks for sharing, Stuart. Really exciting to have you here today. Thank you. I'm going to move sort of in a snake position now down below me into the call. Holly Page, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I'm Holly. I'm an associate programmer at Lively. I've only been in the industry for about a year, so I keep calling myself to my colleagues the baby programmer, the one who is there like, hi, help me. And yeah, I think I've only really been coding for about 2.5 years as well, so I'm very much new to it, and I'm hoping I could bring like a fresh industry person perspective here.
Thank you very much. I've been in the industry for what day is it today? Like 2 months now. So consider me the wee babby of community management. I'm going to pass it on round now to Tiffany. Introduce yourself, please.
I'd also start by saying that, Holly, you might be the newest programmer of us all, but you also probably are the most up to date. Programming evolves constantly, and you probably have learned things that weren't a thing when I was in your position. So yeah, Be proud in what you know, because I'm sure there are things you know that I don't. Even though I've been in industry for 10 years myself, I've always been doing gameplay. I've worked on many AAA games in studio. I've worked on Formula 1, Far Cry 6, also some indie games like Harvest Hunt or Project Orcs. I've seen many sides of the industry, but I very much love the gameplay specialization, and that's what I do. Although I learned as a generalist, I studied computer engineering as a whole, because, as my parents said, games aren't a real job. But more on that later.
Yeah, no, we will circle back around to that. Rest assured. Fantastic. And then, last but not least, Phil, in the far distance of my screen, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everybody. Yeah, so I'm probably the outlier here in that I've been in the games industry for like 30 years now. Primarily, most of my sort of commercial experience came at Team 17. Since I left then, I've been teaching people how to program games quite a lot and doing a lot of consultancy work, so research and development kind of stuff. These days, I'm an AI specialist, but I actually started as a network programmer, and then I became a gameplay programmer, and then I became an AI guy. So these days, I'm kind of, going much more in that particular direction. And I do a lot of consultancy, I try and help smaller studios, to be honest, because I like working with them, but helping smaller studios take advantage of AI in general in their games.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks very much. And yeah, what a sort of an exciting pipeline of experience you've got there. And yeah, basically, now is sort of the time that we get to take all of these different experiences and sort of your entire journey through games, whether it's been a year, whether it's been 2 months, whether it's been 30 years. We've all got sort of perspectives and experiences that hopefully we can provide to those who will just not have had the same experiences. And I think everyone can learn from the different corners of the games industry that you come from. We've already sort of talked a little bit about your backgrounds and your paths into the industry and how you've got here. But what I'd really like to zoom in then is sort of to sort of talk a little bit about these journeys and these roles that you have, is to talk about more typically about kind of the responsibilities of your roles. I think when you think programmer, when you think coder, you genuinely think 2 monitors, one of them's vertical, it's just a massive block of code in Visual Studio or something like that, and that is all it is, right? Like, it couldn't possibly be more than that. Why would it be more complex than that? But the reality is likely you are taking on responsibilities, perhaps over other teams, perhaps over other people, perhaps over non-code specific things. Adam, you talked about bridging design. You're likely to have responsibilities that just simply aren't staring at the code and making the code. There's going to be a lot more to it, and it's going to be a lot more nuanced. So just specifically, talking a little bit about your sort of personal viewpoints, and I'm going to open these up to the room now, so please don't feel like we have to go one by one. Just sort of a bit of an open discussion about what are some of the responsibilities you have, or maybe even kind of what has surprised you about your responsibilities thus far. Just put your hand up if you want to chat, basically. Tiffany, off to you.
I'd say, before we even get to go about what is beyond code, one thing that's not really surprised me, but I kind of feel like might surprise some people, is that when you get to the actual coding, when you get to the writing, your C#, your C++, your JavaScript, whatnot, you've already done 70% of your job as a programmer, right? Because there's understanding the system, reading the code, knowing what you can reuse, knowing if you need to do new code, what's going to be the architecture like. There is so much to go into. This is why my title is programmer, but I like engineer more, because we don't just write code. Writing code is the easy part. That's kind of congrats, you've done all of your research, you know where you're going, you've got your direction, you just have to write it and then debug it, because it never works the first time. But there's so much then beyond just actually writing the code. And to me, a really good programmer is somebody who it doesn't matter what language they use. They can go from one language to another or one engine to another because they've got those fundamentals about engineering, about code architecture. This is the thing that you find sometimes in job description, talked about like your data structures, your design patterns, etc. These are your fundamentals. These are your tools. Your language is just like a spoken language, right? Once you understand the structure of grammar, forming sentence, and the logic of speaking, it doesn't really learning a new language is just learning the words, learning the grammar, and coding is similar in that regard, in my opinion.
Nice.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to add to that? Oh, Phil, you've got your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah. I mean, I would sort of echo that sentiment, really, in that I'm constantly having to learn new programming languages. You know, recently I've had to learn Python to do a lot of machine learning stuff, and it's like, and that's happened throughout my career, like new programs, new platforms, new languages, new technologies. It's kind of the reason why I like it is because it's constantly changing, but that also means you constantly need to be learning new things. And I would argue that that's kind of the primary thing that people are looking for, right? If they're going to try and hire somebody, they want somebody who's capable of learning new things and not being scared by it.
Yeah, certainly when I'm sort of looking to hire someone, sort of both on Phil and Tiffany's points, I'm looking for someone who knows the fundamentals but can sort of like react to that and be dynamic. And if they need to pick up another language, at least they know what's going on. Maybe if it's more memory management or stuff like that, like, you know, it could be a higher level, a lower level. So I'm looking for those kind of core fundamentals of like, do you actually know what's going on under the hood here and what you're typing? Because it's a surprising amount of people who, I mean, sometimes it's self-learned people, or sometimes it's people who just sort of didn't pick up those at the beginning. But surprising amount of people who come and, you know, are working on games that they don't understand what their code is doing underneath the hood. And you do need to do that for games because, you know, you need to run a tight ship. Things need to be pretty like speedy, usually why we use C++. So it's quite important to get those fundamentals correct, I would say.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm quite grateful for in having learned computer engineering rather than game development specifically. I missed out on some techniques that are specific to games. But on the other hand, I've learned some low-level fundamental that I feel that sometimes are a little bit missed out by games degree. I do a lot of mentoring. I work for Mastered, and I sort of feel it with the people I mentor sometimes that I feel like they're a little bit weaker on those fundamentals. Often people who, for example, have learned Unreal, but haven't learned with Blueprint first approach, and then they get a bit scared by the C++ side of things when there's really nothing to be scared of. But for me, like, one of the things I've learned when I was a student, and it was awful, but in hindsight, I'm glad I did it. We had to rewrite the entire C library. It's like, on one hand, I want to say, like, is this the best time of my life? Absolutely not. Was it useful? Definitely. Not sure I would recommend it. Like, there might be better methods out there, but definitely learn your fundamentals. That will carry you a long, long way.
Yeah. I picked that stuff up because I did just a university sort of like computer science course. So it's probably the pretty standard way to get into programming that most people do. And at the time, you're like, oh, why do I need to learn all the data structures and the algorithms? Are these actually ever useful? I just use if statements all over the place, like, because you don't really know. And then suddenly when you get like thrown into actual real life, you know, programming, you're like, oh, someone's using a hash map for some reason, and there's a reason why people are using that. So don't disregard if there's some, you know, the data structures or algorithms seem boring or how fast they are. Like, don't ignore that stuff, because I am so glad that I learned that stuff early on. I did have to, you know, reread a bunch because, you know, it's a long time ago, but yeah, it's super useful to have all that stuff, and that's kind of the stuff that I'm looking for when I'm trying to hire a new programmer. Is some fundamental understanding of how programming works, not just you can type if, else, and then.
My favorite question to students is usually, what's the difference between a list and an array? And I watch them be like, what? Is there a difference? And then I explain, there's a difference in performance. they're both good, depends on the situation. I'm not actually going to give the answer. You know what? If you're interested, go look it up, or maybe contact me and I'll explain the difference later. I don't want to segue into that. We have better things to talk about, I'm sure. But it's one of those, right? Functionally, they do the same thing, but there is situationally one better than the other. And knowing that difference is what makes you an engineer rather than a programmer.
I of course like to use this opportunity to let our audience know that if you do have any questions, like what is the difference between a list and an array, do feel free to put them into the comments. I'm keeping an eye on the comments, and we're going to make sure that there's a bit of time so that any community sort of audience asked questions can be presented to the panel. So just stock them up now as early as you like, and I'll keep track of them. Nice. I think that explained and sort of opened amount of a huge number of unknowns and sort of talking points there. And thanks for everyone for talking around that. There's quite a good sort of conversation there about people just talking a little bit about how they learnt, whether it's their university experience, things like that. And of course, as with a lot of different parts of the games industry, there's always this conversation about the formalized learning, whether it's higher education, university degrees, or doing a sort of a facilitated course versus maybe just self-learning, maybe just learning in a little bit more of an organic way, finding some Google resources and just going for it in your spare time. What is, sort of each of you, what was your experience coming into technology and background? Did you do it the formal way? And was that enough? Did you do more? Do you feel like it was way too much, and actually you ended up having to actually kind of walk sideways a little bit? Because I think that is a lot of the experience, is people learn a lot formally, and then actually they realize that there's 20% that they kind of had to go learn themselves. What was that educational process like for people? Again, just anyone who's kind of got something to say on that, just go for it. Holly, all yours. Oh, but Holly,
I tried to point at Stuart and then I pointed the wrong way, and that was quite awkward. No one noticed. It's fine.
Sorry, would you like to go?
I'm here. I'll go, but we'll pass to you afterwards. Thanks, Stuart.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I guess I'm more self-taught. I don't have any science or maths background. I did a fine art degree, and I did work in the art sector for a while. But yeah, I guess I kind of stumbled into programming. I did one of those boot camps that was like a intro to games programming. It was very much more learning Unity than learning engineering. And I just very surprisingly loved it. And just, taught myself more from there and did kind of various initiatives. So with Code Coven, I also got the IG50 award, which is up at the moment. So just shouting the IG50 award, you should apply. It's really good. And then I kind of slowly built my way up. Eventually did an internship with Sumo, and then that led to being hired as a junior. So it's been, I guess, quite a strange journey in, and I have fought a few battles of having to prove that I have that technical background in a way, without having it in a degree sense. But I think, you don't have to come from science or maths. And I think it's important to have people in the industry who come from a different angle as well, because I do bring a lot of fresh thoughts into it. And also, I would like to joke that fine art is kind of similar to programming anyway, because it's concepts and making concepts into a thing. Concept code, yeah. Anyway, I will pass over to Stuart. Thank you.
For myself, I was just kind of leaving high school, and I had a fascination with games, and my career advisor pointed me that way, and I kind of just wanted to escape my sort of small town. I never really went to the city that much, and so it was very country comes to town. And so I went and studied a HNC in computer games development at West College, Scotland, and I did a night class in higher maths. And that was with the goal of sort of going to Abertay. And in the end, I think university helped me a bit with the structure of learning programming. but I wouldn't say it couldn't be done without it. You just need to be the sort of right person for it, right? Very self-driven and self-disciplined about it. And I can admit that I need a nudge sometimes, and that's what university really gave me, alongside meeting friends and other colleagues.
Yeah. Well, no. Some hands went up. Absolutely. I'm going to go for Phil. The sort of hand went straight up. Go for it.
Yeah, so I was probably a bit sort of different than most in that I wanted to be an architect when I was originally sort of planning on a career. But then I realized I couldn't actually draw or do art in any sort of way, shape, or form. So I started going more technical. And actually, weirdly enough, I was doing a lot of programming for myself. You know, I was basically doing a lot of graphics programming. There's a thing called the demo scene, which was really popular in sort of Europe back then. And I was doing a lot of sort of graphics demos and stuff for me and my friends, and actually focusing on this sort of, you know, technical career. And then I was posting a lot of, like, you know, sort of tutorials and those kind of things online. And I got invited by one of the lead programmers at Team 17 to join them because he'd seen some stuff that I was posting. And so I to be honest, I think that that's a thing I would very much advocate people to do is actually get out there and post the things that they're doing, especially if it's kind of something that's maybe difficult for other people to do, so you can kind of demonstrate your technical capability. And I found that that's pretty much followed me throughout my career. I've always kind of tried to do things that are open source, or, you know, like teach other people how to do stuff. And kind of why I became a lecturer in the end, really, I suppose, is that I like teaching other people to do things that are kind of challenging. So I think that that's kind of one of the things that I think that the games industry needs, is people who are supportive of each other and actually teaches each other. So I try and do that.
And then Adam, if you've... I saw the hand sneak up.
Yeah, I think I just want to sort of echo what everyone's sort of saying, is that, like, you don't need a formal sort of like education like I did with computer science. Like, I actually only did computer science because I didn't think I wanted to do games at all, and I wanted to do something else like banking or whatever. And like, I was sort of decent at maths, and I thought, yeah, I actually really wanted to be an artist, and I was doing arts. It's sort of similar to you, Holly. And I was like, but you know what? Like, I can't make games. Like, I can draw stuff, and I was doodling and asking programmers to do that kind of, like, you know, to put it all together. And I felt like I was at the whim of the programmer. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I could do some programming. So I did my computer science degree. And then also, similar to Holly, I picked up an internship, which was by far the thing that really helped me with my programming the most, is that context. Like, I feel like in a lot of courses, it's sort of like those classic maths problems, whereas, you know, if Susie has 100 watermelons and she takes away 10, you know, you get all those weird sort of like made up scenarios that you don't actually use a lot. Whereas when you're doing an internship, you're like, oh, this is how people make games. This is, you know, there's stuff that you've learned that you're then using it in context, which was super useful. And that doesn't have to be an internship. I always encourage people to just start making the games, like start using, you know, you don't have to make a finished game, and you definitely don't have to make like this polished indie darling that's, you know, that's gonna, like, you're gonna put online and everyone's gonna play and all this kind of stuff. You just have to start making things and learning, really. Like, if there's some very specific thing that you've seen in a game that you're like, I'm really interested to see how I would make that, that's often the best way I've found to learn on how to do something, because it's just sort of like, take a tiny snippet. You don't have to worry about all the other bits, and there's a lot of boring bits that come into making games that you don't see. But just sort of like, hey, what happens if I did want to do like a clustered AI system, or what happens if I did want to make a, you know, a melee combat system? And I think that was by far the easiest way for me to learn, was just kind of like diving in. Unreal is so free now that you can do that, which is very useful. So
just to follow up on that point, Adam, is that you can see that a lot of these platforms are now becoming kind of open to people creating things. So Roblox and UEFN and those kind of things, right? And people are actually making pretty good businesses out of just doing that. So the point is to encourage people to just make things, as Adam's saying, and you can actually monetize a lot of these things, especially if they're, you know, really compelling. Weirdly enough, a lot of the games I've worked on have come from that kind of background where people have just been making things for themselves and their friends, and it just so happens that the games are actually good, you know. So like the classic one is Worms, right? It was basically one guy in his bedroom making a game for his friends while they were at university, and then coming to a company like us and transforming it into a commercial product. And those kind of things still happen in the games industry, which is crazy to me. You know, like we've got teams of hundreds and thousands now, but actually you can still make relatively small games and make a lot of money out of it.
There's you know, it's not something you're going to download on Steam. It's not on your consoles. It's not what people classically would think of when you sort of mention that subject. But Wordle was just an exactly example like that, right? It was tiny project. Guy made it just so him and his wife could have some word puzzles over lockdown, and then, you know, easily one of the biggest kind of social booms in sort of gaming products to come out in our sort of modern generation. So yeah, definitely a comment on that. And I just love, by the way, the sort of the Venn diagram that's going on here of architect, art, and programmer, you know, and how people seem to move through these stages, especially the kind of the artistic and technical, you know, basically sides of the brain, sometimes kind of swaying one way and the other as they realize actually this impetus is actually better sort of fulfilled with this action, or with this you know, sort of particular what's the word, you know, tools and technologies and things like that.
Just
there's
add to that quickly.
Oh,
Sorry,
go for it.
I also wanted to be an artist, so there we go. That makes most of us now. I'm not going to expand on my story
my
because
God.
I'd rather we move on to something more interesting. But yeah,
I did just want to chime in and say it's probably the reason we all love art is because it is a lot more creative than you think. And that really put me off, or made me think I wouldn't be able to program, because I thought it would be really really technical, but there is a lot of creativity in it as well. So I do still get my art kick, which is nice.
Yeah, I agree. It's super creative and it's problem solving. Creative problem solving is always there. Contrary to what like some people might believe, that there is no one way to code a feature or fix a problem. There are a myriad of ways, and often the nuance comes from why should I do what, or what do I prefer, or what's going to be better for us in the future. So there's a lot of creativity, I think.
yeah, I like labeling it as finding creative solutions to technical challenges, because it brings both words into one sentence. And yeah, I would agree that programming is a lot more creative than you think. It's not like artsy, but it's still creative, and creation doesn't necessarily come from, it comes from producing something. It comes from triggering that problem solving part of your brain, even if what you create is not visually or auditively appealing.
I think specifically for like gameplay, like Tiffany, you'll probably agree with this, is that like what you're creating is so connected to what you're playing and what someone's playing, that there's a lot of sort of like, it may not be just a picture, but there's a lot of feel and a lot of sort of like emotion that goes towards how something controls, or how the camera moves, or how you're doing all that stuff. So I'd struggle sometimes because I want to do creative stuff, but it takes a while to get to those places. I feel it's not as instantly ratifying as drawing a picture or something like that. But at the end, you've made something that people, you know, connect with and have a kind of emotional reaction to, which is, I think, really creative.
Nice. Yeah, I do like that. You sort of quite into the visceral feeling of like that instinctual feeling, right, where code almost has this other sense to it, more than just the words on the page, but actually the sort of the feel and weight of the action that it's kind of going into. Well, I'm going to sort of move us now into what I will indelicately just call part 2, where we want to talk a little bit about like what the industry standards are, you know, for programming, for technologists, for engineers and things like that in the games industry. And I thought we mentioned it earlier, but like that idea of just making, just kind of getting straight into it and actually starting to apply your skills to your own product is often some of the best ways that people can kind of actually get into it, rather than the theoretical, the how many apples, and the sort of the intangibleness, right, of learning programming without actually having a project to apply it to. And I think, so what I'd really like to sort of explore there is, if someone does have these skills now and they've spent a bit of time learning this programming, how do you communicate that to someone? How do you show someone or tell someone, oh, I am a programmer, look at this thing? And does that become a text document of just all the code they've written? Is it a screenshot of a really lovely block of if statements or lists and arrays, borrowing from the language from earlier? Or does it need to be like an itch.io game jam product that's been made? How do you find people communicate those skills now in the games industry, particularly when we talk about employability and hiring?
Fine, then I'll start. I'd say how you display it is pretty much however you want. I see, obviously, portfolio are getting increasingly common. It's interesting to me because just over 10 years ago, when I started my career, I certainly did not have a code portfolio. They weren't a thing back then. They're a thing now. I'd say it's always good to try and have a little bit of explanation on your code. If you want to put everything on a GitHub for hiring managers to look at, go for it. But understand that as a hiring manager, I'm not going to look at your GitHub for 2 hours. It's nice to have pointers in your portfolio, right? To say, hey, this specific feature, or maybe you were talking about like, oh, how about I do a melee system? And you've done that melee combat system. Maybe point to the main class, maybe point to one part of the architecture, or maybe actually don't go into the details of the code and just explain, this is what I was trying to solve. I was trying to make a combat system, and I wanted to be very responsive on the input. So this is the architectural model I've chosen. Maybe I've included that design pattern. Maybe we're talking about like wire list versus an array. Why did you make that choice? Because in an interview, what I find is that, and Adam might be able to echo on that, but I find that people don't necessarily care about what you wrote, but more why you wrote it, why you made that decision. It's all about that creative thinking, that thought process, that problem solving. So if you decide to display code, good. You don't need too much of it, in my opinion. A little bit is good, because we're still also going to look for like kind of like what quality level do you have. For example, if you're looking for C++, how well do you know your const, your keywords, your unique pointers, etc. But if people want to test you on that, there will be a technical test. What they want to learn from you is, what were you thinking? Why did you choose this? Why did you do this? How did you do it? What problem did you encounter and how did you resolve them? Maybe you tried the first prototype and it was a total failure. Why? That's the why that we want to hear about, and not the what.
Nice. Yeah, there's a lot to explore there. I just want to check, Stuart, is that something you want to jump in on as well?
Yeah. Sorry, my brain's a little lost right now. I'm just kind of agreeing with what Tiffany said. One thing I'd like to add to that is that some hiring managers may not actually be coders themselves. So in my opinion, it's a really good idea to get a portfolio showing videos of all the work you've done, explaining your design choices, that sort of thing. And a GitHub as well. Knowing Git is also basically a must for any team project and for your own peace of mind. Sorry, just in case your hard drive decides to explode one day. And yeah, knowing it highlights how much easier you can work in a team and just how quickly you can get things done with people.
I was going to check, Adam, you are muted. Do you want to jump in, or shall I pass it to Phil?
Yeah, I mean, if Phil has something to say, like, he can throw in. I just kind of wanted to add that, like, making it as easy as possible for whoever's hiring or whoever's looking at your portfolio to see what you've done. Don't make it, I'm not going to download your game, especially if it's, this is sort of a junior role. There's a lot more sort of like applications there, so I can't download 50 people's games and play them or see their source base and stuff. So like sort of what Tiffany said, bring out a snippet. This is one piece of code that I did. I mean, I'm not really looking to look at the specific code, but all the whys and stuff is very, is very useful. And that sort of like seeing from clicking your portfolio or from whatever to seeing that you've thought about it, you're not just copying and pasting code. That's a real big sort of like thing that you see a lot, where it's like, hey, look at this game I made, and then you look into it and they actually just followed a tutorial and copy and pasted the code from it. Like, that's fine, and that's a super great way to learn, but you need to show us how it's your own, and how you've changed it, and how you thought about it, and how you've learned from that tutorial. Not just like, I followed this word for word and I made exactly the same product that they've sort of like made. So yeah, sorry, I got carried away. Phil, go for it.
Yeah, I was kind of going to make the same point, actually, Adam, is that you kind of need to respect the time of the people who are looking at your portfolio. So, you know, I had a student once that had like 16 different projects in his portfolio, and I was kind of trying to say, like, the first employer that looked at him, he was a really, really great programmer, by the way, so he was definitely going to get a job. But the point is that the first company that hired him said your portfolio should have been like 4 items. You know what I mean? Because he could have trimmed all of the things down that didn't really impress and just show the ones that did. And I think that that's probably true. I think the rest of everybody said the right things, right? Which is, you want to show off your best work. You want to show off, like, you know, your sort of thinking from when you're doing the development. But you also want to make it really easy to get to, because any kind of delay is going to, you know, rule you out, essentially. So imagine that the recruiter is going to be the first port of call. They're then going to pass you on to a programmer to do an interview. So, and often do a test as well, right? So there's multiple stages. Even like international companies, I've been through quite a few stages while I'm being hired. And you just got to expect it, right? So get used to doing that kind of testing stuff. It's really not that bad. What most people want is to work with people who are great. And that's the thing you're trying to get across, is that you're going to be the right kind of person that people want to work with.
Just on the test stuff, do not feel bad if you can't answer the questions on a coding test. Like, that is okay. Most companies give the same coding test to their juniors, to their seniors, kind of thing. And what they're actually looking for is the creative problem solving. You go, I don't know this very specific thing, but if I was giving it a go, I would do X, Y, and Z. And I want to see your thought process on how you're attacking that problem, rather than just like some people do, just be like, I don't know it. And they just put the pencil down and sort of like be like, sorry, I didn't learn that specific thing in the book that I was reading or whatever. And yeah, it's actually just about how you attack the problem more than it is sort of like whether you know the entire standard C++ library off by heart, like Tiffany clearly does. But yeah, it's not about that, because with Google and things, like, you don't need to know all this. Like, you don't need to know the specific function that does X or Y anymore, especially with sort of like more AI stuff coming along. It's about how you use all that stuff and how you use those tools. Stack Overflow's existed for far too long for anyone to really feel like everyone writes their code from scratch every single time or solves all their problems by themselves. So it's that sort of creativity that we're looking for.
Yeah, I have had an occasion, an interview recently in a technical test where there was a problem and I could tell what the code was doing, but there was a notation, a big L, that I had never seen in my life. I've been doing this job for 10 years and I'd never seen it in my life. And I literally just looked at the interview and was like, so I know the code does this and that, but I cannot give you the final answer because I don't know what that big L means. They explained it to me and I gave them the answer. Simple as that. If I said, oh, I don't know the answer, that's it. I would have probably had a minus point from that, where actually they probably appreciated that I just needed a bit of guidance. That's one thing that's very important. I've seen a few questions prepared about how do I keep on top of my game? How do I keep learning? Ask your peers. I learned far too late in my career that I cannot solve everything alone, that I need to rely on the rest of my team. And if you don't know, ask. Code reviews are also here for that. Code reviews are not here to say, hey, you can't code. They're also here to say, this is what you could be doing. Have you considered that? Sometimes people challenge you and you have the right to say, no, I'm confident that this is the best solution. And sometimes you look at somebody else's code review and you ask, hey, why do you do this? I don't understand why you made that choice versus the other choice. Why is that better? And this is how you learn, at least one of the ways you learn. Always be curious, show that you are willing to learn. That is, beyond problem solving skills, probably the most important thing you can do for yourself in an interview.
Yeah, just to sort of add to that, I think tenacity, being able to I suppose hit your head against a problem for long enough that you actually come up with a solution seems to be a thing that I think a lot of people want to know, that they want people who will be tenacious in solving problems. And it's not a thing you can really teach, really. You have to kind of want to do it, I suppose.
Yeah, the best people that we've hired are not the people who sit there and suffer in silence. They are the people who ask questions they give it a go themselves, and they sort of go, actually, I'm a bit stuck, and then ask. Like that's always the best way. Like, I know some people who will just sit there and just be like, just not know what to do and just get stuck for a really long time. And actually I have to be like, you can ask for help, like it's okay. And like that's part of like learning. And there's no one programmer in the team that knows everything. If I'm looking for a specific AI thing, I'll come to Phil, or something like that. So we all have different expertises and different sort of like things that we know we're good at. So it's that kind of communication is important. Don't know how you show that in a portfolio. There's a bunch of different ways.
that person sitting and struggling for days on end, pretending that she was going to solve it very, very soon, was me a few years ago, and that did damage to my career. That prevented me from getting promotions because I wouldn't learn, because I wouldn't dare to ask. And it wasn't even my pride that got in the way; it was my imposter syndrome. But the result was the same. I had to do something about it, and that's probably, the best thing I've learned in recent years is just ask. Don't pretend that you know it all. Don't think that you know it all. Somebody, like Phil said, be tenacious, try and solve it on your own. Don't always ask the minute you get stuck. There is value in solving it yourself. But you're also building a product, right? You're not working on your own game. You're not like, it's not your hobby. This is your job. We have deadlines. Every day you waste costs money. At the end of the day, this is still a business. We are still here to make profit, even though we want to make it in a fun, engaging way and want to make good products that are going to make people happy. We are still a business, and you need to answer to that, and finding that balance between solving it yourself and asking for help, knowing when to give up, and also like knowing when to bargain with the rest of the team over features and what we have time to do and not do, is part of your job and part of the skills that you're going to need to acquire throughout your career.
I think you've really wonderfully managed to preempt actually sort of a question that was going to come up later, which was, we were going to potentially, I was going to prompt talking about, what advice do you have for someone who, given that the industry changes so quickly and given that technologies and requirements change so quickly, like how do you keep afloat with that, right? Like it's, you sort of mentioned it earlier, but something you learned 10 years ago may not be relevant anymore, and something you're learning today just may not be relevant in 8 months. Like, it is kind of crazy how things move on like this. But rather than ask that question here, it sounds like we've actually found an answer there, right? Which is, it's in making sure that you are a creative problem solver throughout. Like by being a creative problem solver, those changes in the industry are actually going to be solved by you creatively through over time. You're going to ask your peers how to overcome these challenges, and you're going to constantly be reevaluating your relationship with the problem in front of you. And by doing that, you're hopefully going to keep up to date with the sort of technologies and the trends. Does anyone want to sort of, if you want to sort of expand on that just a little bit more, go for it. And I feel like, Tiffany, you've got something in the chamber.
Yeah, just two quick things. And they're more for companies than they are for individual, really. But it's one, hire juniors. Because, they will have learned the newest standard of C++, for instance, which may have brought some stuff that you didn't know about because you're stuck in your day-to-day. And it can be really hard when you're like in the heat of the moment, in the, deep into trying to make the product, trying to push for that next milestone, for the next deadline. It can be hard to find that time for self-development. And those juniors bring a self-perspective, new techniques, new tools. They will know things you don't, and you can rely on them for that. people, I said junior, but that also works for people who come from a different industry, right? Hiring people who come from fintech, they may have processes that the game industry is still very immature. It's a very young industry. There's still many things that we don't know how to do properly. Still a lot of things where we take corners, right? And learning from other industries can be a massive boon for that. And the last piece is also, there's always a lot of talks. GDC just happened. If you can get access to a vault, a lot of companies provide the access. There are some free talks online. Get a mentor. I got a mentor in my career. Halfway through my career, I felt like I needed to get better at reading code and understanding unknown code. I felt like I was a little bit weaker on that, so I got myself a mentor through Limit Break, and it was really, really good. It helped me so much. So yeah, but it all goes to like learning from each other, no matter the format of being like synchronous or asynchronous or whatever. It's learning from each other.
Nice. And actually, pass it over to Phil because you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just want to echo the same kind of things, really, as Tiffany. One thing I will say is that it's really good if you can recognize that you're on a team that is kind of supportive of each other, because what you often happen is that somebody will have a specialism, right? And it's kind of coming on to the sort of next topic kind of thing, is that I would evangelize particular things because I'm an AI guy, and that's something that other people will learn from me, but equally I would learn things like graphics programming from the graphics programmers. So the point is to have a team where you've got that sort of that spirit of sharing each other's knowledge and actually learning from each other. So you kind of essentially getting the benefit of a bunch of people's different perspectives. And I think that's really important to recognize. It was something that I was very aware of when I was working at Team 17, is that my team was really productive, whereas a lot of others weren't. And the difference was that we were like that, right? We were helpful of each other and respectful of each other. And it's kind of it's a thing you need to recognize when you get your first gig and you kind of realize that, yeah, this is the right kind of team, and stick with it.
And yeah, you've alluded to something that actually we will sort of move on to, but we'll only spend a few minutes on it just so that we can take some time to take some questions. So really what I'd like to do is just this idea of specializing and sort of maybe looking at a junior career versus like a senior career. It is possible to specialize as a programmer. It's possible to specialize as a technologist in the games industry. But it would be interesting just to find out, like, how does that kind of that if you imagine a skill tree, if you will, because gamifying everything, right? If you imagine that skill tree where you've got that one sort of node at the top, you can spend a few points in it, and that's your sort of junior programmer, whatever, and then it spreads out into all of these different specializations, senior roles, and sort of titles that someone might have towards the sort of the end or the sort of the apex of their programming career. What does that look like? And in particular, like, how do you control how you move throughout that career path? Which is basically to say, how would you specialize if you were interested in doing that? If there was a particular path you knew you wanted to end up at, rather than, what I know tends to happen, which is people just tend to get promoted to the lead of a team. And then from there, they just sort of move sideways into another team and promoted to the lead of that team. And, that's sort of the more accidental, I suppose, escalation of careers. And in particular, I'd really love to sort of hear about the people, if you are earlier on in your career or you remember wanting to go in a particular direction, like what was that like in that given moment, and sort of how did you, sort of where were you in that moment? Anyone, go for it. Phil, go for it.
I suppose I'll go through mine was chaotic, really chaotic, right? I mean, I went through a whole bunch of different specializations. I got hired as a network programmer. I ended up doing gameplay for the most of it. And then I ended up as an AI programmer at the end because I kind of really enjoyed it. And because it was a small enough company, they didn't really care what you were doing as long as you were doing something productive towards getting the thing shipped. So I think that, like, it's useful to get into a company where you can change roles when you're first starting off. Likely is that if you're going to be a junior programmer, they're going to give you things that they don't necessarily want to have to do themselves, or where they think it's easy enough for you to handle it. So you might have quite a variety of jobs. I know a lot of like the guys that I've taught end up having quite a varied sort of thing when they start off. The thing about specialization is it's more about following your passion, right? If you've got a thing that you really want to do, it can help you to do that, because obviously as you specialize, you become more experienced in that one thing and your value goes up for that one thing. So, like if you're an animation programmer, right, it's really hard to hire good animation programmers. So they definitely get hired quite a lot. And I would say the same thing for AI and those kind of things. So in a way, I like gameplay programming. I love that kind of experience of making things like make work for the game, but I'm also very technically minded. So I kind of went towards the AI as that technically minded challenge thing, away from the gameplay programming. So, I mean, I guess that what I would say is that you can do all of these things. You can start off in one thing and transition to another. At least I've found that's the case.
Yeah, I think I've made a career of specializing in being a generalist, if that is a thing. As in, like, gameplay is a big grab bag of stuff. That could mean AI, that could mean it's a lot of UI often, but like there's a whole bunch of stuff that really means. So I definitely think specializing will help you in your job security later down the line. Like Phil says, everyone's always looking for that very specific thing. Graphics programmers, engine programmers, animation programmers, all that kind of very specialist stuff. It's easier to hire for or to find those jobs because it's very specific, right? So, but I would say know what you want to do, but hold that loosely. So like, if you want to be like, I'm really going to explore AI programming this time, and then if you're in a career or whatever, tell whoever is responsible for your manager or whatever that I'm really into X, and you don't have to live and die by that. That doesn't have to be sort of like forever the rest of your life. But people knowing what you want to get into and what you're specifically interested in from your manager or just people who are in your company, it's much easier for those people to help you out or to give you opportunities. Even like when you're trying to get into games or trying to get your first job, saying what kind of specific thing you're interested in. Again, it doesn't have to be the thing that you do forever, but if you say, hey, I'm actually quite into AI, that gives someone a place for them to put you and for them to be like, oh, okay, well, that's much easier because we've got an AI sort of like space, or we've got 3 AI programmers that are like there and can help you out or can help you guide there. And it's much easier than being like, yeah, I don't know, I want to do everything and anything. Like, as much as you might want to do everything, it's easier for people to understand sort of like what you want to do if you just have some opinion on where you want to go. And like I said, it doesn't have to be forever. I was a producer for a while and that was a mistake, and now I'm back. So like, yeah.
Aspirational producer right here. Thanks, Adam. No, I'm going to just pass it down to Holly as well. Holly, you had your hand up real quick.
Thank you. Now I'm going to have to remember what I was going to say. That's okay. I think I was, going off what Phil was saying about juniors. It very much feels like my employers want me to kind of touch as much different stuff as I can in the game. So I remember when I was first looking at jobs and wanting to get in the industry, I really had it in my head that I really liked UI programming. And now I'm like, I don't think I do, which is quite funny. Yeah, Adam's like, no.
No one likes UI programming. I'm kidding.
No, a lot of people do, but I don't know if it's for me. But I'm really enjoying kind of learning as many like small amounts of a lot of stuff as possible. So really staying general. But I think being a specialist does like have its place. It's really important, and I can see myself going down that route. But I don't think I have kind of discovered what that is yet that I'm really passionate about or that I'm really good at. So for me, like, generalizing is great.
Nice. Tiffany, go for it.
Yeah, the specialist there. I'm kind of like maybe the opposite of some of you lot, where I found out quite early I wanted to specialize. I've been blessed that I got to try a few things. I got to try physics, hated it. I got to try networking, hated it. UI, let's not even talk about it. Graphics, I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. I'm the opposite to Phil, who, Phil, you're saying you really like all of the really super low-level technical stuff. I'm like, I am the opposite. I want to work as close to designers as possible. That's what I want to do. Just give me gameplay system. That is it. I want this and nothing else. And this is, but I'm 10 years into the industry and I've got that specialization. So when I look for a job, I'm like, is this a generalist role? No, thank you. And that is it. And I understand that I'm shutting myself some doors in doing that, but I'm also opening others in doing that. It's kind of like, it's a trade-off. You were talking, Jonas, earlier about the skill tree. I view whether you specialize or not as basically your typical D&D character. You roll your dice. These are your dice. You attribute your points, and that's what you get. You can put all of your eggs in one basket, and you'll be super good. Like, you will be the stealthiest person. Nobody will ever detect you, but you cannot even lift a sack of flour, because you've put all your points in dex and nothing in strength, and that is it. Or you can just be a bit of a jack of all trade and you'll be decent at everything, not excellent. But what I want to go beyond that is, when you play D&D, you play as a team. And in your team, you will have maybe a person who's a bit good at everything. You'll have a person who really heavily specializes in trap detection, and that's their vibe. A person who's like, they are the arcane specialist. They will know every magic. You can trust them completely on that. And a game team is like that, right? It's a bunch of adventurers with all different stats that they've allocated. And when you hire, you're trying to hire, okay, what do we need in our party? Sometimes you need a specialist, sometimes you need a generalist. And the hiring manager will try and look for the person they need for that one time, that one moment, that one project, that one team. And you could apply for a company and you could be amazing. You might not just be the person they need right now, this instant, because you always need somebody to fit a very particular role, a very particular situation, much like the choice you make as a programmer of what do I choose, which data structure over another.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks everyone for sort of providing, for really opening up that conversation. I think there's a lot there to take away. Now I am going to attempt to sort of do a masterful feat of hosting here, which is I'm going to attempt to fit in a Q&A in like 2 minutes. Okay, realistically it's going to be like 5, but there's some really good questions in chat and there's only a handful that I'd really like to sort of jump on. So what I'd really appreciate here is I'm going to bring up a question on chat and I'll read it out. And then when it fades away, I'd really love it if just one person could just jump in with a very snippet answer, really brief, real, just to the point. And then if it feels like a conversation, it can be a conversation. But if it feels like we've answered the question, we'll just move on. I don't want to sort of keep anyone here beyond any agreed time that they've set aside. I'm sure we all want to go back to making D&D references in conversations outside of this one. And I do love a good D&D reference. So I've got a question question here from Bree, which is how would everybody recommend learning to program? Should I start with one language or gain core concepts or go in a different approach? So we've obviously touched on a lot of this earlier, but if anyone's got sort of a succinct answer to this, by all means, Holly, go for it.
Thank you. I would love to answer this because I think you should go with what you find really enjoyable and what kind of sparks that flame of passion. And once you're like hooked, then you can figure out what you're missing with, like, whether that's fundamentals or whether that's like you're seeing loads of jobs that are in C++. So really just make as much as you can and just do what you find really fun.
Brilliant stuff. I'm going to move on to the next question just to really help get through it. XBX Athenian, based on your experience as entrepreneurs, obviously this speaks to anyone who feels like that very much encapsulates their spirit and experience. What is your advice on the best route to utilize our skills? Do you reckon it's get a job, just go straight into the industry, or build a game and turn that into your business? And I think really important here is like job versus self-project sort of style. Adam, you've got your hand up, go for it.
Yeah, I would say it's incredibly rare and hard for you to be able to jump straight into building a game and building a business at the same time. There is a lot of, I would call it tribal knowledge of like stuff that happens within the games industry that you just don't know about if you haven't seen it before, if you're not in a studio, any studio from small to big. So my advice would be like trying to get a job in the industry. You know, if you're looking to start an indie, try get a job in an indie studio. If you're looking to like get a bigger sort of like in a bigger company, then yeah, anything is good because you pick up so much from just so much experience from learning from others, like we've talked about this whole panel basically. So get some experience first and then do it, because it's quite a risky and scary thing to do, start your own business and try and go alone.
Nice. Thanks for expanding on that one. A really specific question here, but I feel like it's worth answering, and we can answer it real quickly. I'd love to know which bootcamp Holly went to learn programming, or just in particular. I
guess I'll take that question.
yeah, absolutely. It's very targeted, isn't it?
Thank you. I did my bootcamp with Next Gen Futures, but I would really recommend Code Coven. Also, as Tiffany mentioned, Limit Break for mentors. And generally, if you network around, you can hear whispers of great things and follow where that is.
Yeah, no, not to blow my own horn here, but Into Games sort of is a good mixing pot where we can help direct you to a lot of the right resources around, you know, any given discipline. Tiffany, go for it.
While we're on the shout out, Mastered is a good one to look at in the future, as well as a new one with Creative Alliance. I'm part of a local game dev group in Leamington Spa, and they're just starting a bootcamp starting in just a few weeks. I think you may still have a few days to sign up. If I recall, they end on the 31st, so maybe check that one out.
Nice. Well, I think what I'll do there is actually that's probably a really good call to action where I will shut it down for the questions. If you've asked your question in chat and you haven't been able to get it answered, by all means, come to the Into Games Discord, ask that question in our space. We have a massive community of Into Games, of UK games industry professionals who will happily sort of take a minute just to give their perspective and answer you on anything you want to know. And I'll do my best to just signal, point people towards different resources, courses and things happening around the UK space. So thanks for that. And what I'd like to do now is just give everyone a chance. If there's something you'd like to champion, something you'd like to share, or if you just want to basically say bye, I'm just going to go around the room and just give everyone a chance to kind of give any closing words and let us all go about our days. I'll come back around the room, the reverse order. So Phil, any sort of finishing words of wisdom?
Yeah, I guess the main thing is just to sort of encourage people not to be put off by the games industry, and actually is a great place to be. Creatively, it's very much a meritocracy as far as I'm concerned. There's lots and lots of opportunities for people who want to do good things, so go for it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Tiffany, you mentioned Code Coven Mastered earlier, and the showcase in Leamington Spa, but anything else you'd like to sort of touch on before we go?
Obviously Tiffany Wild is my name. You can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Twitter. I'm also in the Into Game Discord if you want to find me there. By any means, please reach out if you haven't had your question answered. Just send me a message, send me a DM, and I will reply. And if I can't answer your question, I'll direct you to hopefully somebody who can. So just, my door's always open.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Holly, over to you.
Yeah, just thanks from me. I feel like I have learned a lot from everyone else here, so this has been really nice.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Stuart?
Just to echo Phil a little bit, things are quite rough at the minute, and you know, it's still a career for many people. I'm also happy to answer any questions in the Into Games Discord. I think I'm there. Please tag me and I will answer. But it's been wonderful speaking with you all.
Cool. Thank you so much. And over to Adam.
Everyone said all the good stuff. But yeah, it's a great place to be. Do keep trying. I know it's hard to get into the industry. There's lots of resources out there that will help you. There's lots of people who want to join the industry. So try, cut through and keep going, because it is worth it. It's really fun. I've never worked a day in my life, but it's always a good time. So yeah, and likewise, DM me on Discord if you've got any questions specifically about gameplay or stuff. And thanks for listening.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Once again, we touched on it, but Into Games has just opened up IG50. This is where you can apply, and IG50 winners basically get spotlighted and kind of given a bit of a platform and a bit of a boost in the games industry to really highlight the next generation of potential talent. And Limit Break mentorships are opening up soon as well. If you are someone who needs a little bit of assistance or a partner helping you develop in the games industry, please take a look at that as well. There are so many great UK initiatives that are all combating that difficulty of the entry-level games industry and how high a wall it is to climb. And please don't hesitate to reach out to anyone, and they will point you to those resources, because they're all just doing missions for good, really. I've been Jonas. We have been Concept to Code, engineering and programming the games journey with Into Games and the Video Game Ambassadors. Thank you, everyone. I'm now going to click a button that will end the stream. Please enjoy your Easter holidays ahead. Right. Bye-bye, everyone. And